Okay. Aboriginal Soul Channel. We're about to get down on some documentation, right? We're about to trace this stuff. We're about to look at some stuff. This is all about genealogy, about so-called black people in America realizing, waking up and doing their research and realizing who they is. So I'm here to help you. I've done my research. I have a lot of my documentation, and I'm still searching for more documentation because it's a rebirth into this. You find out that your people didn't come across the Atlantic in the trunk of a boat, like the brother said, then you really start to look at stuff and start to learn who you is. You start to see that the people that was here that came before you, that you shared a bloodline with, the things that they did, the same thing we doing to some degree or another. So we're gonna start this off with this document right here. Okay. So when I went on ancestry.com, this is the last document I could find for one of my third great grandfathers from Alabama. It says the colored population. Right here it says 1866 for 6th Ward, Mobile. So it says 66th Ward, Mobile. Okay, County, Alabama. All right. His name is down here. So when I printed that document out, this is what came up. This green line, square box, Mobile, 1866, square box, Mobile. It did not say Ward or 6th Ward at all. But my third great grandfather's name is right here, Jim Rigby. Jim Rigby. So I found out Ward, Alabama is an unincorporated small little town inside of Sumter County. Right. So let's go. Let's see. Okay, so each state has a research outline. So this is Alabama's research outline. We're going to go down to Sumter County. Sumter County, Alabama, was created by an act of the State General Assembly on 18 December 1832 from the land ceded to the state by the Choctaw Indians. Okay, so 1832. So in 1840, Sumter, eight years after becoming a county, it had almost 30,000 people in it, which is the highest number. I'm looking is the highest number on this sheet out of all these years. There's a census taken every 10 years. So 1840, 1850, 1860. Mysteriously, almost 30,000 people showed up in Sumter County in 1840. Right? Now, I looked at Alabama's population, look, by race. Okay, this says race and Hispanic origin 1800 to 1990. See down here, it says 1800. Go across here, that's the total people they saying that was in Alabama was 1,250 people in 1800. Look up here, the first column is white. It says 700 people, 733. And black, 517 people. Black, so-called black people in the state, in the whole state of Alabama, there were so-called only 517 blacks in 1800. Okay. Now look, this is the slave section, so-called slave section. So from the very start, Alabama had so-called free blacks. See this, the free column? But anyway, 517. Now if you go up, 1810, they had 2,624. And if you jump 10 more years, they had somehow a whopping 40,000 people showed up, basically, in 10 years there. 40,000 black, so-called black folks. Okay. So try to figure out. So I found a book from 1851 called The History of Alabama, written by Albert J. Pickett. Here's a little clip I took from it. So it says, the writer is satisfied that Mobile was upon the north bank of the Alabama and at a place now called Choctaw Bluff in the county of Clark, about 25 miles above the confluence of the Alabama and Tom Bigby. Now that's the two rivers, right? Tom Bigby. So when Jim Rigby in 1866, Jim Rigby, right here, my third great grandfather, when he left Alabama in 1866, he had a son named Tom the same year. He was 60 years old. Jim Rigby was 60 years old in 1880, so he was born in 1820, thereabouts. But you see right here, it says Tom Rigby. And then this river right here is Tom Bigby. Okay, so that river runs through Sumter County, which is where Ward is at. Ward, Alabama is in Sumter County. When I looked up Ward, Alabama, only thing came up was the Choctaw territory and land and this and that, right? So that's why it didn't show up when I printed it out. That was the only document out of all the documents I have, and I have many, that did that. It came basically encrypted. That document came back encrypted without the sixth word on it. So now I looked up that river because it's called the Tom Bigby, spelled B-E-E right now. So it says, whatever the real story, the French apparently named the river after a Choctaw word for maker that they interpreted as Tom Beckby. That evolved under the English into Tom Beckby, and then Tom Bigby, spelled exactly like my great grandfather's name, except for it's Bigby instead of Rigby, right? First and last name, only one letter off. And they lived on that river. There's no coincidence in that. But he said that evolved under the French, under the English into Tom Begbie, and then Tom Bigby, and finally the present day Tom Bigby, spelled with B-E-E at the end. Okay, so this man, which is my third great grandfather, Jim Rigby, left Alabama in 1866. His wife was pregnant. Named his son Tom Rigby. Okay. And I have some other documents where the so-called race went from black to Negro to mulatto, back to black, and things like that. But I'm just showing you, he named his first son in 1866, Tom Rigby, one letter off from that river. Now, this, oh no, not that one. Now, this is an interesting thing. So the Choctaw and Chickasaw ceded the least district to the United States under the Choctaw-Chickasaw Reconstruction Treaty of 1866. So the least district, which is the land west of the 98th meridian, that's southwestern Oklahoma. Basically, the state gave the Choctaw and Chickasaw people in Alabama and in Mississippi land in Oklahoma, but they didn't leave. Then they finally left in 1866, but they didn't go to Oklahoma because they wanted that land too, right? They said they ceded the least district to the United States under the Choctaw-Chickasaw Reconstruction Treaty of 1866. The United States appropriated an additional $300,000 to pay for the region and established reservations therein for the Kiowa, Comanche, and Apache in 1867. The Wichita and Caddo in 1868, and the Cheyenne and Arapaho in 1869. These reservations were allocated to tribe members beginning with the Cheyenne and Arapaho in 1891. So therefore, it says they established these reservations in the 1860s, but didn't actually give it to them until 1890s, right? The Choctaw and Chickasaw received nearly $3 million for the surplus Cheyenne and Arapaho lands in 1893. See, 1893. It was not until 1951, however, that the Indian Claims Commission awarded the Choctaw and Chickasaw $3.5 million for Greer County, declared to be a part of Oklahoma Territory in 1896. Look, 1896. Okay. So we see why my third great grandfather left finally in 1866, right? Because they wanted all the land. So let's go over here because Now, this is county information in Alabama. So right here we got Tuscaloosa County. It was ceded in 1818 to the state by Cherokee and Choctaw Indians. But you had a tornado come through and destroy the courthouse in 1842. And that means that the records that were housed in that courthouse were destroyed. That's what that means. You got Tallapoosa, 1832, land ceded to the state by the Creek Indians. Talladega, Creek Indians, okay. Sumter, Choctaw, 1832. Now, my third great grandfather was born around there in 1820. See? And then the documents show that Jim Rigby, born in 1820 in Alabama, right here, ALA. His father and mother were born in ALA, Alabama. Okay, so they was born in the late 1700s, or further back, or the beginning of the 1800s, something like that. Right there. Now, understand that when you do your research, you'll see that the settlers hadn't came in yet at all. There was a fort, maybe a fort right there, a fort here. That's it. There was no plantations, none of that. Maybe one where like I said, on the fort. When they came, they was on the forts until beginning of the 1870s is when they started coming in. We'll get into all that later on in another video. But I just want to show you right there. See, 60 years old, 1880. These right here where it says race, it used to say nationality, and they'd have used to say nationality. Now it says race. Okay, Russell, 1830, Creek Indians. Keep going. Monticello, I looked that up. That means a small mountain. Remember that. Look, this was the Cherokee, 1818, Morgan County. Cherokee Turkeytown Sessions, 1816. Turkeytown. That's, if you look up the Turkey, you'll see that that's Indigenous American. Look, Monroe, Creek Indians, 1815. A courthouse fire destroyed records prior to 1833. So they gave them the Creek Indians gave them some land, not this whole county. They gave them some land on it, which they lived on part of it too. And they would make it a county and then go through and do so it was 1815, so they did a census in 1820 and 1830. But here it is, a courthouse fire destroyed all records prior to 1830. So they destroyed the records of the people, and then which said their nationality, said what nation and their tribe and things. Then brought them back as what? After 1830, what was the Indian Removal Act took place in 1830. So they was taking land and taking identity. Keep it going. Okay. Cherokees, 1836. See, they were still living there even after the removal. They were still living there. Marengo, Choctaw Indians. That's right next to Sumter. Right next to Sumter County. Hey, 1866, huh? Okay, so Lawrence was given by this parts of this land was owned by 3 different nations of people: Cherokee, Chickasaw, and Choctaw. And look, the courthouse burned in 1859. Okay, let's get it right. So they gave them the land. How many census did they take before 1859? And then bam, all of them destroyed. Now that's a particular date as well, right before the Civil War. Or, well, no, what did that say? Look at this. It says this thing was abolished in 67, renamed, hold up, recreated. It says recreated at Sanford County in 68. So abolished and recreated, that means something. It probably equates to the records being destroyed. You understand me? Look at here, Jackson County, created 1819 from land ceded to the state by the Cherokees, right? So bam, Union troops burned the courthouse and most of the county records in 1864. Okay. All right. So, okay. So Greene County, 1819, out of parts of Marengo and Tuscaloosa County. And that's probably Choctaw and the Creeks, right? Then they made Haley County in 1867 from Marengo and Perry. That's probably so far we got Cherokees, Choctaws, Chickasaws, and Creeks, all in Alabama, giving up parts of their land. Okay, so this was Greene County was originally called Mesopotamia. Okay, remember that thing there, because I looked that up, and it's a small little town in an area of Mexico that Aztecs and Olmecs previously dominated. So that's interesting. So, okay. Franklin, 1818, by the Cherokee and the Chickasaw Indians. Courthouse was destroyed, 1891. Remember that 1891? That's interesting. Yeah. It is abolished, recreated as Etowah. Etowah, that's an Indian word. A lot of these words is. 1836, Cherokee Indians still giving land. Crenshaw, 1866. That's a ever reoccurring date there. A year after the Civil War. Anyway, moving on. The courthouse burned in 1898. Remember those dates? Remember those dates, because that'll come up later on in the next video or two. I'm gonna show you how it was taking land and stuff. and then taking identities as well. And then so they would take on the identity of an Indian, and then get all the land and all of the, you know, what the Indians' rights and the privileges and all that stuff they would get. Now look right here, 1821, all that stuff happened, abolished, 67, reestablished, 68. But look here, Montezuma was what this place was called, or the county seat inside of this county. So they have, like, you know, like it's like a capital in the county, to whatever town. So Montezuma from 1823 to 1847. That's, like I said, Mesopotamia down there, Turkey Town. Now you got Montezuma, okay? And it was that at the beginning, from when the people, original people that was still there, uh, was calling it. You look that up, that's a brother from the 1500s, Aztec, which is a so-called black man, but really just like a copper-colored Indian. Montezuma, look. So you got Mesopotamia, Montezuma in Alabama, which were not any of old or new Mexico, any of that territory. Alabama was way to the right of Louisiana, you see what I'm saying? So it was never old or New Mexico. Moving on though. Oh, hold up. Look at this. Courthouse destroyed in 47 by flood waters. County records destroyed by fires in 1839 and 1878. Okay. Remember, it became 18 or county in 1821, so they had census every 10 years. So 1830, 1840. Look, right, a year before the next census and a year before that census, and then okay, 1838 was when the so-called Trail of Tears took place, where people had to walk from their land. So bam, the very next year they destroyed the records. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so Conecuh County from Monroe County. I bet you that Monroe is creeks. That's creeks. Courthouse burned in 1865. Last year, the Civil War. The courthouse burned in Alabama, right? Okay. What's this? Abolished 67, re-established 1870. Okay, okay. Coffee County in 1841. The courthouse was destroyed by fire in 1851. Oh, okay. By 1851 was there was a law passed, the Indian Appropriations Act, where they wanted everybody to leave their land and go to a reservation. And then I think in 1871 they wanted people to just become citizens and just not be Indian no more. I believe that's what it was, but you can look into that. But there it is right there. Destroyed that. Destroyed that. Look, Choctaw County was created by an act of the State General Assembly on 29 December 1847 from portions of Washington and Sumter County. Now, you remember, that's where my third great grandfather left in 1866. So in 1847, they were still there giving land, right? See, they made Choctaw County in 1847. They made Sumter in 1832. And my people was there going back. See, all right. See, Cherokee Indians, 1836 was giving up parts of their land. They give the land to them, and then they would name it after the people to show some kind of, we taking your land, but we'll name it after you to honor you or something like that. Whatever they was doing, trickery, deception, that kind of thing. 1832. Look. Okay, let's go back. We might have missed something. Let's see. Okay. So yeah, it's not hard to tell what happened when you look at this stuff. Put it all together, get all your documents, and then you start putting things together. Look right here, Butler, 1819. Courthouse burned, April of 1853. Many records damaged. Okay, all right. Now, see all that stuff changing. September 1889, it changed. The bill, let's see. Anything happened up in here, let's see. It's changing the name. Cahaba, that's Indian. See Indian folk all in this stuff. All you gotta do is look up the word and see what tribe or nation that word language is. Bam. Baldwin County, the old county down there on that water. It's like Mobile, Baldwin down there, 1809. But that's Chickasaw, Choctaw, Choctaw land, Choctaw territory, all that Baldwin, Mobile, all that on up through Choctaw and Sumter over into Florida. Mississippi, into Louisiana, all that. Oh yeah, we all one people, man. People are related, don't even know it. We don't know what happened, so it's hard to piece things together. But that's what we're gonna be doing on this channel. We're gonna be piecing this thing together. So, see, that says Choctaw lands a lot of east of the Mississippi River. A lot of east. See, remember that east. But look, they had a bunch of fake folks, coming back. They destroy the records, and then the people that would come back, documented Native Americans, would be opportunistics, right? To say the least. Opportunistics. The federal government land sales. Okay, you get into it, Here. It's right here. Trying to get us up here to Territorial census, federal census. So basically, so you know how I said my third great grandfather was born over there in 1820. Now look, it says the 1820 federal census was lost for all counties. However, the state census exists for Baldwin, all these counties right here, which is not Sumter, right? And it says the 1890s federal population census for part of Perry County, Alabama, survived a fire in 1921. So, yeah, that's look, 1890 federal Union veterans and widows census did not survive for Alabama. Oh yeah, a bunch of they destroy stuff and then bring it back to fit their program, right? So look right here. It says no federal census records exist for Alabama for the years of 1790 and 1800. See? So understand me when I tell you there was all that slave stuff they talking. They watched. Now they was enslaving people. They was capturing Indians and enslaving them for sure. Because I got that part of my history as well. I'm not no lightweight researcher at all, by no means. And that was up in North Carolina. But here's a relative of mine, another third great grandmother. Now she was born in Texas, but her people was from Mississippi and Alabama. That's my third great grandmother's name before she got married. Okay. See her birthday? That's her birthday. See, she put this application in when she was 49 years old in 1902. Okay. She knew who she was the whole time she was living. See how she got her? They got her down as Chickasaw Freedman. She's Chickasaw. There ain't no freedman thing. That's a lie. Freedman, free slave, Negro, black, colored, all that's words they gave us to cover up our true identities, okay? Which is the nation of Chickasaw, right? So on this side. But her dad was born in Alabama. Her mom was born in Mississippi, okay? They closed the rolls, the sign up time in 1907. So she got in, she wasn't going to sleep on it. So that's just two sides. I'll reveal more later, in other videos. But yeah. So we go back down here. You can see we could try to chase some. Let's chase one of these. We could do this one. So Greene County was created by an act of Alabama Territorial General Assembly on 13 December 1819 out of parts of Marengo County and Tuscaloosa County. So we go look at Marengo. It was ceded to the state on 1818 from the Choctaw Indians, or 1816, something like that. Anyway, Choctaw Indians, right? So that's where Greene County came from, that part. Okay, so Tuscaloosa County, let's go down there and see what that was. Tuscaloosa, 1818. Cherokee and Choctaw. So Greene County was Cherokee and Choctaw Indians, right? Okay, let's go back up there. So now Haley. So Haley was taken out of Greene County, which was given to them by Cherokee and Choctaw. So Haley, damn. So 1867. Gotta piece this together, right? So Haley was created out of the eastern half of Greene County and parts of Tuscaloosa, Marengo, and Perry County. So we already know Tuscaloosa and Marengo were Cherokee and Choctaw. What's Perry? What was Perry County? Okay. Who was on that part of Perry County before 1867? Creek, 18 of them from Montgomery County and from lands from Creek Session. So the Creek Indians, okay, Montgomery. Okay, parent was Monroe Creek. See, 1815. So the next year they got some more land out of them and called it Montgomery, right? Damn, see how that goes. And then let's see, that was 1816. And then right here, 1819. Now you gotta look at this. See that creek? See the creek there? Go look at the Creek Indian Wars. That's like from 1816 to 1819. Look at the Seminole Wars, the first or second war. I believe it's the first one actually. Took place right after the War of 1812, which, if you look that up, the U.S. was trying to come across them Appalachian Mountains. They was fighting like 15 plus tribes from over there. You talking all them like the lake around Lake Erie and all that, and down all them Indians over there. You just look up those wars, and you can correlate the dates of them wars with the advents of these counties and stuff. See, all the wars. See, look, a courthouse fire destroyed all records prior to 1833. Okay, Creek. See, 1815. They came in there and probably encroached on these folks and then kicked off the war. See, 1815. I think that's when the war started with the Creeks and the United States. You have to look it up and look into it. But I just showed you how to track down your people, period. I'm going to show you how in other books and other ways, I'm going to continue to show you how all the people on this continent was Negro type people, okay? Copper colored folks, Indians, that's what they was. That whole coming across the Atlantic Ocean, you got to research that. They didn't even come that way when they came. I don't care what you see on the maps. They came up there where the ice was at, where the ice was in the water, where the water was still. They didn't come across that Atlantic like that. It take a brave heart to do things like that. But anyway, so let's see. Now, this is that book, History of Alabama, I was reading out of. So, Alabama again. We on Alabama. I had to. Okay, so right here it says this is Chief Tuscaloosa. Now Tuscaloosa means black warrior in Choctaw language. Okay. Remember this man right here. It says, I'm gonna just read from right here. Look, it says, however, the chief gave him 40 Indians. So this man would be asking for people. He would want people. After, he says, after a few days, a noble-looking young savage of gigantic proportions. Gigantic proportions. That's anyway. And with a face extremely handsome and interesting, visited the marquis. He was the son of Tuscaloosa, a potent chief whose domains commenced 30 miles below and extended to the distant Tombigbee. See, Tombigbee? He bore an invitation from his father to DeSoto to hasten to his capital, where he was making preparations to receive him upon a magnificent scale, and then awaited him upon the eastern confines of his territory. The son was dispatched with a suitable reply and presents for the father. Having remained at Tallahassee 20 days, DeSoto dismissed the chief of Cosa, with whom he parted upon good terms, crossed the Tallapoosa in canoes and upon rafts, marched down the eastern side, and encamped the first night at Casista, probably the site of the modern Artusi. Delayed in passing the river, he could not have advanced further that day. In the morning, the march was resumed. During this day, a large town was discovered, and at night, the camp was pitched upon borders of another. So, see, in Alabama, large towns, borders of another town. He'd be passing towns, not even going in them, not even talking with, really messing with the people. Okay, anyway. The next day, advancing within 6 miles of the temporary residence of Tuscaloosa, a halt was made in the woods. Luis D. Moscoso, the camp master with 15 horsemen, was dispatched to inform the chief of the proximity of the governor. Moscoso found the proud Mobilian seated upon 2 cushions placed on a large and elegant matting upon an eminence which commanded a delightful prospect. That eminence, that's a mound, okay, that they would, I will get into the mounds later on in another video, but he was on a mound right there. Those villages and towns were consisted of mound structures for sure. Okay. His numerous attendants posted themselves around him, leaving space for the nearer position of his chief men. One of these held over his head a round deerskin shield with a staff in the middle, resembling an umbrella, painted with stripes of different colors. Now remember that, painted with stripes of the different colors. You'll see that in numerous different books, images, and this and that. And that was what the Indians of America did. They stripes and things. Painted with stripes of different colors. It was used as a banner in his wars, but was employed at present in protecting his head from the rays of the sun. Tuscaloosa was 40 years of age, of great stature, with immense limbs. He was spare around the waist, and his whole form was admirably proportioned. Okay, admirably proportioned. His countenance was handsome but grave and severe. He was lord of many territories. Now, Rewind. His son was also gigantic. Now, who else do you know that's big like that in America? Is it the Indians that we grew up watching on the TV, on the you know, all them Indian cowboys and Indian? No, none of them was big like that ever, ever. Right here it says, uh, an officer was sent among the horses to find one large enough to sustain the giant Indian. A large pack horse of property, the property of the governor, was selected. Apparelled in a rich suit of scarlet and a cap of the same, given to him by the De Soto, the chieftain, who was a head taller than any of his attendants, mounted upon his horse, with his feet nearly trailing on the ground. Okay, with his feet nearly trailing on the ground. Understand that part. Okay. Big dude. We all got 6, 7 feet family, or you know, we ain't all got 7-foot family, but we got a lot of over 6 feet family in our family. And if you go back and look at a lot of the so-called slave, runaway slave ads and all that, you'll see how they say 6 foot is tall. So imagine, like, you know, 6'6", 6'8", 6'10", you know, things like that. People in our family. Okay. Look right here. It says the death. Now this, listen to this, okay? You gotta be on top of this. It says this was the Alabama. It says on the march here a distressing disease broke out among the Spaniards from the want of salt. I don't know what that is. The death of several, together with the loathsome condition of the sufferers, spread alarm in the camp. Those who afterward used ashes with their food from a weed recommended by the Indians escaped the dreadful malady. Okay, see the ashes from a weed that they ate with their food that stopped the dreadful malady. Okay, that's herbs. Herbs, indigenous. See, right here it says the Indians, having no canoes, soon constructed rafts of dry logs and cane, upon which the troops were rafted to the northern or western side of the Alabama. And this was in 1840, Alabama. After these people didn't survive out of the southeast, no other Europeans tried to come through there until like the 7th, you know, close to the 1800s, you know, 1700 or something. So in between at 150 years, what you think them people was doing? Having each man having 15 to 20 kids, like some of our great uncles and grandfathers and stuff and grandmothers, or what? Do you think their numbers was getting big, or not getting big, getting larger, or getting more numerous? I think so. One other thing you must understand about America in general, but look right here. It says De Soto and Tuscaloosa arrived at the capital called Mobilia. It stood by the side of a large river upon a beautiful plain and consisted of 80 handsome houses, each capacious enough to contain 1,000 men. That meant in this town, in this capital of Mobilia, 80 houses, each one could contain 1,000 men. So that's 80,000 people in this one city right here in the 1500s. Okay, they all fronted a large public square. They were encompassed, okay? All these big old houses, 1,000 people in one house, those were huge. They were encompassed by a high wall made of immense trunks of trees set deep in the ground and close together, strengthened with cross timbers and interwoven with large vines. A thick mud plaster resembling handsome masonry concealed the woodwork, while portholes were abundant, together with towers capable of containing 8 men each, at the distance of 50 paces apart. See, that's how the towns were. Look up Palisades. You'll understand that there were Indian villages that weren't behind walls, and there were. That's why when you look up so-called prison encampments during the Civil War, they said there was over 150 of those, right? But if you look at the one that was supposedly the one that was in Natchez, Mississippi, you'll see that they said they barricaded the people behind the walls and walled it off. They didn't barricade the people behind nothing. The people was behind their own walls. But I'm gonna move on. Says Mobilia was upon the north bank of the Alabama and at a place now called Choctaw Bluff in the county of Clark, about 25 miles above the confluence of the Alabama and Tombigbee. So yeah, I like to go in these old books and just, now, this is a book that came out in 1851. It was republished in like the late 1800s, 1880 something or 1890, right? And so always look out for that too, because at one time the books was telling the truth, and then they transition into telling a bunch of lies, right? So, and there's a specific time period in which that happens. So if you get books, uh, back in like 1840 or 50 and going back, a lot of those still have a lot of the truth. When you get into the books that came out in the 1860s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and beyond, 1900s, 1920s, 30s, boo boo boo, those start to, you can see the transition. And then when you get even further into our time, you start seeing this African American. You don't see the African American in the books back there, even though we can go over here and okay, let's go right here and say that Alabama always had so-called black, right? Even though ain't nobody's skin black, it's real dark copper, 1,001 shades of that copper. But see this, all these free people. So if they wasn't free African American, what would you call a person from Africa that wasn't a slave? You call them the same thing as the slaves, which was Negro and black? Or would you call them their nationality? I don't know, but look right here. Okay, I can show you uh, in this book. I read this book and it's very interesting. However, uh, there's a lot of falsehood out there people put out. A lot of falsehood. Just feeding it to the people like it's, man. Let me find what it says. Look, this says right here, this woman that wrote this book, her name is Harriet Washington. The book is called Medical Apartheid. Medical Apartheid, right? Medical Apartheid, the dark history of medical experimentation on Black Americans from colonial times to the present. That's her book. It's a deep, deep book. And even though she, you know, she's under the education of the colonizer as well, so therefore she still thinks she African and all that, and that's all good. But what she did some studies that have some real knowledge in them, that how the people was being dealt with and things. But that's her book, Medical Apartheid, and in it she's saying right here, she's explaining about all this stuff she learned from them about the slave trade and stuff, the numbers, blah blah blah. Right here she says, in some states, the Black population completely comprised slaves. Alabama, for example, forbade the presence of free Blacks. Forbade the presence of free Blacks, okay? This is a Black woman who wrote this book and fed this to who? Other Blacks, right? Us Black folks, we most definitely go and look for other Black people's books to read. So she's feeding this to Blacks. Says slaves. Alabama and Hispanic. This is a government document. This is not my document. I don't play no games like that. So this is not my document. I didn't type this up. Look right here. Okay, in 1830, it had 1,500 free Blacks, so-called, right? So who telling the truth? You got to be able to know what you're looking at, right? You got to know how to research it. People will sell you anything. People lie to you. You know, they don't know they lie. Some people don't even know they lying. They've been lied to themselves. I told you, dog won't shut up. Oh my God.